Joining me now to discuss Bernie Sanders, the DNC, and basically everything in between. Welcome to the show, Nomiki Konst, the host of the Nomiki Show. Welcome.
Wow. You should do my
Did I get
intros
it?
for me. You did. You definitely got it. I would say usually people get it one time. They very rarely get it two times in a row. So you're
Oh,
already
that's
in like
amazing.
the 0.2 percentile in life, in my entire life.
Fantastic. Well, there's a lot to discuss here. So it's so funny going into this. Like when we planned this conversation, I thought, oh, we're gonna be spending, like 15 minutes on how Nevada screwed up somehow. I'm amazed that it went smoothly. So, like, what is your initial takeaway just from not even Bernie's win, but the process of the Nevada caucus and how it went?
I mean, I don't know how perfect the Nevada caucus was. I just know, as we've said for months now, that in order for Bernie not to be affected by any shenanigans, he has to win by very big margins. So
Mhm.
even if there were shenanigans, there were shenanigans. They tried to get the culinary workers not to support Bernie. They smeared him. I'm sure there was stuff on the ground that we are not even aware of. But at the end of the day, the caucus, the Latino turnout was high, supportive of Bernie, as they were last time around. And, he mobilized. I mean, that's really what this is about. It's about a movement that cares enough to not work, right? Because when you're caucusing, you're not working. Of
Mhm.
course, union workers are covered, but for the most part, you're taking time out of your day. Sometimes you're dealing with childcare issues. You're standing all day long for the most part. And it takes real commitment. And if there's one thing we know about Bernie Sanders, he has the most committed supporters.
Yes, absolutely. And I guess the another benefit here is that the caucus was on a weekend, and I think having elections, having the vote on weekends, actually is really good for voter turnout. And when it comes to caucuses, though, do you think this is the last year that we're going to see caucuses because of what happened in Iowa, or are we gonna keep them?
No, I think one thing that I was informed by on the Unity Reform Commission, which, just to remind your viewers, was a commission that formed after the 2016 election. It was a negotiation point between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders at the convention. They wanted to start this commission to reform the primary and caucus process and the Democratic Party and to reduce superdelegates. And we went beyond the mandate, of course, to reduce superdelegates. We eliminated them on the first ballot. I would have liked to eliminate them altogether, but
Yeah.
we were in the minority on that commission.
Hmm.
So on the commission, I learned a lot about caucuses. I went in being like, this is such an archaic, silly way of doing democracy. But what I learned was, number one, it comes down to the states, whether or not they determine they're a caucus or a primary, the state legislatures. So it would have to be essentially a bipartisan. In Iowa, it's a Republican legislature, so that would
Hmm.
have to be passed through the Iowa legislature. In Nevada, I believe it's a Democratic legislature, but I'm not sure actually. So first, it would have to be passed legislatively. But the difference between primaries and caucuses are, and you got to think about this for a second. Caucuses are controlled by the party. Now, the Democratic Party is flawed, and every state party functions differently. The Iowa Democratic Party actually has a better reputation than, say, like the New York Democratic Party, where I live.
Mm.
But the caucus process is overseen by the party. The primary process is overseen by the state legislature, by the state. So
Okay.
if you're in a Republican state, or if you have a Republican legislature like Wisconsin, there's some real voter suppression happening. So, the people who were advocates for reforming caucuses would cite a couple of things. If you're in a Republican state, caucuses are still a way to protect voters. The turnout is not extremely low. It's actually pretty standard with primary states. But it doesn't guarantee that it's going to be fixed if you have a primary system. New York, notably, has the second lowest turnout in the entire country
Hmm.
when it comes to voter turnout. We're a completely Democratic state. We have almost closed primaries. We had very closed primaries before, just had a few reforms. So, it's a case-by-case scenario. There were some reforms we put forward. Of course, the monitoring and being aware of what the totals are, having the data released is really important for transparency and for the campaigns to understand how the process worked and to hold the party accountable. But we never talked about this app, which was just a crony favor Tom Perez's, favorite consultants. I don't know what happened there, but
Yeah.
it was not something that came through the Unity Reform Commission.
All right. So I guess let's turn the focus now to Bernie and what happens now, because before the Nevada win, even though he won Iowa, he won New Hampshire, there was still, I guess, sort of this air of can he pull this off, or will he do this? At least in the cable news. But Bernie won now. He doubled, more than doubled Joe Biden in second place. Yeah. So, like, what is this it? Is this going to continue? Does this momentum carry on? Can they do anything to stop him? Like, what is at play now with Bernie Sanders and basically his path to the nomination?
I will say almost 100%, unless barring some extraordinary situation that you never know in politics. Extraordinary things happen all the time. I would say that the only candidate in this race right now that has a shot of getting 1,991 delegates to secure the nomination on the first ballot is Bernie Sanders. So much so that I actually think he has an 85% chance of doing so before the convention.
Wow.
Again, that number just keeps going up. I'm being very conservative with that number. So that means every other candidate in this race, including Michael Bloomberg, only has a path to winning the nomination if, number one, we go in with a brokered convention, which is in my 15% chance maybe that we have a brokered convention, although I think it's much, much, much lower. Then once we get there, it goes to a second ballot, and the candidate has to basically take all of the other candidates' delegates and all the super delegates to win. We already see centrists who hated Bernie Sanders 2 weeks ago saying, all right, guys, Bernie's our nominee. Let's cut the act. But of course, there are going to be actors in the Democratic Party. There are consultants who are pitching their candidates to keep raising money, to get on those debate stages and fight hard. So they have those moments where they can raise money. But at the end of the day, I think Nevada was actually very indicative. You have a pretty strong Democratic machine there. And if there's one state where Joe Biden should have done well, it would have been Nevada. I mean, yes, he's not doing as well with Latinos as Bernie is, and he might do better, and he still might win South Carolina, and he still might win Tennessee. If he wins one state, he might lock down a few states in the South that he's been networked into for years. With that being said, I don't see him getting anywhere near 1,991, and the entire strategy of all these other candidates is to be the one candidate on the second ballot who can get all of the superdelegates too.
So what's their thought process then? Because if they're actually being realistic about it, and I think you're right, they don't have a shot, but they're still in this race. And especially when it comes to someone like Elizabeth Warren, who should care about the issues. And now, I mean, I got to say, this entire year has put into question for me anyways, Elizabeth Warren's entire fight. Does she actually give a damn? Like, is she in this for herself? Or all her fake smears on Sanders and the supporters, like that whole thing. Like, I get her. I get from her perspective the tough position that she's in, because there's nothing really of substance to attack Bernie Sanders on. And if that's where you think you can pull voters from, you have to, I guess, create something. But then in doing so, when you're creating these phony smears, I think it's just hurting your reputation as the person that used to be looked at as the progressive senator in the Senate. So what is Warren doing? Like, that's what I'm curious about. What is she doing? Is it consultants fooling her? Like, what is happening with Elizabeth Warren?
I mean, I would love to say that it's consultants fooling her, and that might be a big part of it, because, yes man syndrome is a real thing. I think we even have it in our movement. It's a human thing. Yeah. I think that she probably has surrounded herself with consultants who feed her with the idea that she needs to keep going out there and fighting hard with specific points to get press so that they can raise money and pay the consultants' bills. Because the longer that she's in the race, the longer, presidential campaigns are very expensive, and there are media consultants in particular and other senior strategists who make a lot of money, working as vendors, especially if they're not working for other candidates too, because that's sometimes the case. Mm-hmm. So I think some of it's that. I think some of it's delusion, frankly. You're invested. You create a narrative for yourself. Where I'm really lost with her is in her attacks against Bernie. Because It's one thing to think that you have a path to victory, which is just completely delusional at this point. I mean, I have dear friends of mine on the campaign on the Warren campaign who I text with regularly, and they're smart people. And like, I know that they know better, and I know that they see the writing on the wall, because there are people in Warren's campaign who are speaking off the record, leaking to the press that they don't know what's going on. I mean, listen, politics is a real grift.
Yeah.
And I think it feeds itself. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess she's taken on a super PAC now after her entire campaign was built on this idea that we have to get super PACs out of politics and these big money donors out of politics. And it's like her attack on Sanders is so disingenuous, saying, "Oh, she's the." Well, her initial argument was that her and Klobuchar were the only one that didn't have super PACs, but if you look at, like, there's no actual Bernie super PAC. There's just like the National Nurses United. There's Sunrise Movement. Apparently these count as PACs according to Elizabeth Warren. Like, so I just don't understand what the hell she's doing. I don't like, this is really hurting her reputation. I hope she understands this. It's really hurting her reputation with the base that she will need in the future. And I've even seen people talk about, hey, maybe we should primary Elizabeth Warren. And this is a discussion that just was never even considered before. But because of her position now and what she's doing, like, do you think the Sanders campaign is still looking at her as a potential vice president the way that maybe they once were? Do you think Bernie's opinion of her has changed? Because the thing with Bernie Sanders, I feel like he's very easygoing. And he doesn't seem like somebody who really holds a grudge to people that generally agree with him on the issues, by and large. So I wonder how he feels about her, but I got to think the campaign thinks a little differently about her, about Elizabeth Warren at this point. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I can't speak on behalf of the campaign, and I definitely won't speak ever on behalf of the campaign unless they tell me to, or Bernie himself.
Yeah.
I can only offer my perspective, which is I don't really see a pro at this point for him. I don't know. I mean, people have mixed opinions about this. There are people who think it's a great way of unifying the party. I think if you're going to look at a vice presidential slate, I think somebody like a Barbara Lee would be strong, because, there's one thing that Bernie Sanders has that really separates himself from the rest of the Democrats and Republicans. And he is fundamentally, absolutely 100% anti-military industrial complex. And that is something that Barbara Lee has, something that Elizabeth Warren does not have.
That's right.
And, Barbara Lee, I mean, some people say, oh, well, her age, she's 74. I just don't think that's going to stick. I think she is a force of nature. She is just like Bernie Sanders. She has shown where she is specifically on this issue throughout history. And when it comes to all other issues, she lines up. Sometimes she backs the establishment, but I think at the end of the day, she's probably the best. That's my choice right now.
Yeah.
And I think it's a signal also for the establishment. Like, listen, we believe that women of color are not being represented, and this is somebody who has fought so hard for, I don't know how many years, 30 years, in office as a movement leader, and she has not yet to receive the type of deserved attention and support from the establishment that she really should. So that's my position on it. I think Warren, I think you're right about this. I think Elizabeth Warren, it's not just that she's being disrespectful to progressives that she may need in the future. She's disrespectful to progressives that got her to this point. And that is where I think I'm, frustrated as a progressive. I've seen this with other candidates too. Candidates I've given money to, I've supported, I've made phone calls. I personally feel disrespected when they run as Bernie people and then they switch, as soon as power comes knocking on their door. And Warren took it personally. So I don't know. I can't see Bernie not being affected by that when she's smearing him. I think that hits him. I really do.
Yeah. And it bothers me, honestly, more than I want to admit, when Sanders is smeared himself as somebody who is divisive. When you have to struggle to get Bernie to attack anybody, like on legitimate issues, on their legitimate, like, incorrect positions. Like, Bernie Sanders could have gone after Elizabeth Warren on her foreign policy. I haven't seen him do that ever.
Never.
And that's just a policy difference. But he could be doing that. I think you're right in the sense that I think Barbara Lee would be a fantastic choice. Nina Turner and Rashida Tlaib are also ones that I like as well, though I could see the argument against them, just in terms of Nina Turner has been a state senator, hasn't really been all that, I guess, politically involved, in the sense that she hasn't been like a U.S. senator. And Rashida Tlaib still early in her career, so I could see the argument there against her. But still, I mean, three powerful people that I think would be fantastic vice presidents that I think are better choices than Elizabeth Warren. Now let's so this is kind of going back a little bit, but the DNC, there's this worry. There's this worry that that Tom Perez is gonna change the rules at the convention because apparently he has complete power. Is that correct to say that? So, like,
sort of. I mean, yes, so, yes and no, but yeah.
Do you think he would be willing to do that? Like, do you think he'd be willing to face with a scenario where Sanders doesn't have a majority, but a plurality of delegates at the convention? Do you think that there's something something he could do to kind of screw the nomination for Bernie Sanders?
I cannot see him doing that, but I also didn't imagine an app ruining Iowa.
Yeah.
And that was a Tom Perez, all roads led to Tom Perez. Do I think Tom Perez is a Bernie person? No. Tom Perez won't even acknowledge my existence. And I worked on the Unity Reform Commission.
Yeah.
With that being said, I'm just trying to set this up because, like, there's definitely, personally, I think there's friction between me and him and other people on the commission. I think that he fought very hard at the end of the day to pass the Unity Reform Commission recommendations. It was something that, he campaigned on reforming the party, and it was something that he could say, like, look, this is something we did. With that being said, the DNC members are not stupid. They are starting, if they don't know about the process, they haven't known about the process in the past, they know about it now. And when I say DNC members, I mean like the elected DNC members, not the appointed ones. And so they see that Tom Perez keeps stacking these committees, like the Rules Committee, with his favorite people, and he's just appointing them. And then all the people who run across their states trying to get elected and getting votes and, are doing this out of pocket, they're not being put on these committees. It's really just going to his cronies. And why does that matter? It matters because the rules for this primary process were actually written by the Rules Committee. It wasn't by the Unity Reform Commission. They looked at the recommendations after we voted on them, after the whole DNC voted on the recommendations, and then it went to the Rules Committee, or just prior went to the Rules Committee to kind of like tweak them. And so I say that because, yes, does he have the power as the chair to change things? He does. We learned that through Donna Brazile. But it will likely put it through his pseudo-democracy of the Rules Committee. But at the convention, there are going to be delegates from Bernie on that Rules Committee. So it's a little bit more democratic. I just don't see it. I don't see anything big happening last minute there. I think this is why Bernie just needs to crush it. There's no room for shenanigans in the end. I say this over and over. David Axelrod said right after the election in 2016 that even if Russia did meddle, the margins should have never been so small for a Facebook ad to make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. All right. That's good news because I think there's a lot. I see in my YouTube comments, a lot of the worries are worries that I don't have because I feel the same way you do, that I just can't imagine. I can't imagine them overturning a victory that would be so clear that we're beginning to see now, like with wins like in Nevada. If he continues winning like that, like by 10 points, by 20 points, you can't overturn that. And I think they're facing sort of the same scenario that the GOP faced with Trump in a way where they maybe, even if they wanted to do something about it, the entire base was with Trump. And at that point, you just got to kind of like let go and be like, all right, this is where we're at now. So even the people in power are going to at some point have to bend the knee to the will of the people. Cable news, though. So you have experience on cable news. I've seen many clips of you on Fox News, and like it is rare, I got to say, to see a more objective analysis of the Democratic primary on Fox. I shouldn't say rare, but it's weird to see a more objective discussion of the Democratic primary on Fox than on MSNBC, where you have James Carville and Chris Matthews going nuts over Sanders winning Nevada. What's going on with cable news? And I mean,
do you have 2 hours?
Yeah. Hey, if you want. But like, what's going on with cable news, I guess, generally? And do you think they will change? Like, is management like, is at some point, I mean, for me, it's weird because these corporations that run these media companies definitely are at odds with Bernie and his agenda. But especially when you have MSNBC, which is supposed to be at least the vocal arm of the Democratic Party. If Bernie's the nominee, what are they going to do at that point? Like, he's the party at that point. So do you see MSNBC changing? And also, I'm just curious about your experience with Fox News and sort of them allowing you to kind of say what you want to say on there, and how that whole process works.
I'll start with my experiences because I think that kind of will aid. I have a lot of experience on Fox News and CNN and a little bit on MSNBC from 2016, but I'd say in 2000, I've been doing cable news since 2012, and 2012 to basically the end of 2016, I was doing like CNN and Fox almost daily. I mean, when there was a day that went by, I'd be like, what happened? What did I do? What did I do? But, during the Bernie campaign in 2016, that's when I started to see Fox was treating me a little bit more fair than just having me on as the punching bag. But what it did was it actually crystallized my ability to debate the issues prior to that. I mean, I could go on Fox and when you have 4 Republicans coming at you, you're prepared for a debate. And so it was weird in 2016 because suddenly I was given this space, and you can find old clips online of me giving, a fair and accurate analysis of the superdelegate process, for instance. And then I would go on CNN and they would have 4 Hillary people up against me, and I felt like I was at Fox again.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately, I mean, what you said about them being run by these multinational companies, that's really what it comes down to. And that includes, by the way, Fox. Fox is owned by Disney now. Yeah. So on one hand, yes, Fox does give a little bit more airtime for Bernie Sanders. On the other hand, 75% of the time on Fox, they're calling him a communist who, if you want to see Venezuela and you're going to see the whole Cuba narrative, and they dance with each other. I mean, News Corp it's now owned by Disney, but you'll see people on News Corp who are Democrats who worked in the Clinton administration on the board of News Corp. So, I mean, yes, they are to the right, and they will push the narrative further to the right. And I think especially under Ailes, he did that more. I think what's going to happen now, and I've tweeted about this a couple of days ago, is you're going to see Bernie's the nominee, right? You're going to see a lot of news commentators who might actually be left suddenly be free to express that they're supporting Bernie Sanders and why you need to support Bernie Sanders. And, people like Chris Hayes, although he's a host, so maybe not, but people who might be actually on the left. Yeah. And then there are folks who were never on the left, but realize he's the nominee. But where you're going to start to see the narrative, and this is what I fear, is you're going to see them saying things like, Bernie's never going to get anything passed anyways because he doesn't have the Senate. Bernie's not going to win down ballot. We're going to lose because, and this is what Pete Buttigieg is pushing out right now, is he's trying to make it sound like Bernie is going to ruin the country because we're going to lose all these seats. That's just not true. Bernie has expanded this party. Independents who were not registered as Democrats are now registered as Democrats to vote in primaries. Disenfranchised, disconnected Democrats who, disenchanted. I mean, every sort of dis you could possibly imagine joining the party. And young people who may not have been voting at the rates that they are with Bernie are now in the party. And that can only help down ballot. That can only help. Even the conservative Democrats in those swing districts are bolstered by Bernie Sanders, who intersects with Republicans. So I think you're going to see people like Chris Matthews in a couple of weeks maybe shift to Bernie Sanders isn't going to get anything passed. He's still going to have a Senate led by Mitch McConnell. He has pie in the sky ideas. They're going to be watered down. But we have to support him over Trump because Trump is ruining democracy. But before that, we're going to hear more Russiagate.
Yeah.
So there's this whole.
Yeah, and it's so what you're saying is exactly what I talk about all the time on my channel. How Bernie Sanders, he expands the base. How is this point not the major point that's always made? Is that Bernie Sanders in 2020 he will be able to bring out the Never Trump people, or I should say the blue no matter who people that voted for Hillary in 2016. Those people are going to come out regardless because they want to vote against Donald Trump. But at the same time, he also brings out people that didn't vote in 2016, independents, young people, these disillusioned voters, working class voters. I mean, this is such an obvious point that they are purposely avoiding making it on cable news because it makes Bernie's point for him that he is the most electable candidate, and they don't want to admit that, or they don't want to, I guess, come to terms with it because it's just so obvious on his face, which is why I think there's going to be a massive, if Bernie's the nominee, massive voter turnout in 2020 for Democrats, and people that are saying Bernie's not electable now are gonna, I guess, still have jobs on cable news because everybody that's always wrong always has a job still. Like, why does that happen? Why do all these people that are always wrong about every major issue continue to host all the cable news shows, continue to be invited on television? I can't think of any other profession where you are consistently wrong and yet you keep your job. Like, is that just a trust kind of thing, or are people just hired? Are certain people just hired because they listen to management? Like, what is that thought process?
I used to think that maybe it was just a bubble. And then in 2016, again, like all I did was cable news for 4 years. I have horror stories of like sleeping on green room couches because they'd have me on debate nights. And the next morning I would do like the early show at like 4 o'clock in the morning and I get my makeup touch up. I mean, I was taking naps constantly. There is definitely a culture of like people know where their boundaries are. And then there is also, and this is something Crystal Ball and I talked about on my show recently, there's also direct messaging that goes to the host. So I have no doubt, and this is notorious at Fox News. Fox News literally would send out a memo every day and everybody had to be on the same page about certain issues. Mm-hmm. And some shows had more room to push a certain way than the others. But for that, for from 8 o'clock until 10 o'clock at night, all the shows had to cover Obama's a Muslim in a certain language. Yeah. And I think that CNN does the same thing. I mean, they would have me on several times a day and they'd send you articles and it would be from certain sources like Politico. I think that there's that infrastructure. But in 2016, it was extremely clear to me that there was a political agenda. I was at the convention and I was in discussion with CNN about a contract. I don't want to go too much into detail about this because it's still sort of a private conversation, but I essentially said no, I won't endorse Hillary Clinton at the convention. And then I really have barely been called back to CNN since then, after being on almost every single day. So, I mean, there was nothing I could do to swing a bunch of Bernie voters to Hillary. I mean, if Bernie couldn't do that, why could I? Yeah. But I was also a delegate. And, I think that's what we have to keep in mind here is that we're criticizing MSNBC for their ridiculous coverage during the primary. We're going to be criticizing CNN pretty soon for their coverage during the general election. And the funny thing is in 2016, we were criticizing CNN and not MSNBC because it was more Clintonian and they were shifting more to the right. So now we're further to the left. Yeah.
And it's weird. Like, I feel like I almost watched CNN, at least right now, almost watched them evolve in like while Nevada was happening, because I was flipping between. So I streamed the entire Nevada caucus on Twitch. I was switching between CNN and MSNBC. MSNBC consistently garbage, but then CNN, I was like, they have Alexander Rojas of Justice Democrats. Van Jones was making great points. Other people on there that are normally a little more centrist were making some good points, and actually it wasn't even just about the points. It was that they were actually being objective to the facts about what was happening in the Nevada caucus and what this means for the party. And I guess I was wondering, like, would that carry over to the general election, or are they going to do this thing again where they're trying to play both sides of, sure Bernie, but Trump, or but Trump, like where they feel like they have to play it even though it's obvious to the, like, looking at the facts objectively, which candidate will be for people and which one isn't. Like, I guess what I'm looking for at a cable news is an objective analysis of the actual facts, and to have media actually represent real people. And I'm not sure I'm ever going to get that because, again, these massive companies or massive networks are owned by massive companies, and that's just kind of I guess the world we're stuck in. One last question here: the debate is tomorrow, the South Carolina debate. I'm not sure, is it the last debate, or are there more coming?
I think there's going to be, so you've got South Carolina. There's another debate at some point. I don't know where it is though.
Okay, so what's going to happen in this debate? I mean, these are just predictions right now. I know none of us know, but like, is Bernie going to be the focus of the attacks?
Yeah.
Is Warren going to still focus on Bloomberg, hopefully, or do you think she's going to try and attack Bernie? Like, what's the dynamic you think right now that'll happen? On stage tomorrow.
I mean, Biden's winning in South Carolina. I bet Bernie will go after Biden a little bit. I think you're going to see more beating up on Pete. Pete's been out of his mind the last couple of days.
Yeah.
He's just, I mean, his Russia commentary about Bernie, he is looking for donations. So Pete's going to want to have a few moments, breakout moments, because you can smell it that he's desperate for donations right now. So he can, I don't know what their path is. Like, I think they're delusional, but he's trying to negotiate something. He's not going to be on Bernie Sanders' ticket, clearly, and he's not going to be anywhere in Bernie Sanders's. I don't know. I think they're all mercenaries, frankly. I think Biden probably thinks he has a shot. I don't know. I mean, I assume people are still going to keep attacking Bloomberg. I think that's probably going to be Bernie's focus. Bernie is going to focus on Biden and Bloomberg.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, Elizabeth threw attacks at everybody last time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, for her, it was kind of Warren's last stand. Like this was the time where she really had to do something, and I think she had a great performance. It just it didn't turn out into anything in Nevada. So again, as you said earlier, I don't know why she's in this race. Bloomberg clearly is trying to hurt Bernie and buy this nomination for himself, but I think it was even leaking out of his campaign after Bernie's big win in Nevada that even Bloomberg's campaign is a little shaken and are beginning to realize that, I don't know if I'm not even sure if billions of dollars can buy this nomination for Bloomberg now. Like, I think they had to have their realization moment where it's just, this guy's actually really popular and he may actually win the nomination. And we're in this moment now where it's like, I always felt that this was possible, but now that we are actually in it, and it's happening, and he's won the first 3 states, and he just won Nevada huge. It's crazy. And yeah, have you? I'm not sure I've really even been able to internalize it yet, because it's happening right now, and I don't know. I'm kind of speechless. Like, what do you think progressives should do, leftists should do, Bernie supporters should do? Like, what is our position right now? Like, how do we continue this fight and ensure that Bernie wins big, and that we don't leave too many bitter people behind as he's doing it?
Right. I think we cannot be comfortable because they're still coming after us. We just have to keep the margins pretty big. Whatever happens out of South Carolina, don't feel disillusioned, because South Carolina was never really on the map. Although he might get a few. I mean, they might split delegates there if he doesn't win it. If he gets in second, he still might do very well. So. I would just keep in mind, like, if you're talking to friends and family that might be more establishment, might be leaning towards Warren, what I'm focusing on with them is there's only one candidate at this point who can win on the first ballot. And if we want to keep this party together, we can't be throwing Hail Marys to take him on, because if it goes to second ballot, there's no say who the candidate. They're all going to be. You saw them on stage; they're all attacking each other.
Yeah.
It's not like they're all nobody's going behind one candidate. They're definitely not going to go with Bloomberg. They're definitely not going to go with Pete. Warren's trying to be the unity candidate, but the rest of them all hate Warren. There's no, there's no candidate, right?
Yeah.
So I just try to come from this perspective of listen, Democrats, we have got to be smart when taking on Trump. Bernie annihilates Trump in the polls head to head. He's been vetted for the last 30 years and especially the last 5 years. He is bringing over Democrats that realize that he will keep the party together. He'll keep the country together. I mean, you look at something like the CDC right now, right? CDC, excuse me. The CDC, like, is barely existent, and we're dealing with coronavirus.
Yeah. That's
what happens when you have Trump as the president right now. Your air quality goes down. I mean, we could go through a litany of issues, but if we're like looking at a coronavirus disaster where like Italy is stopping travel and people are afraid to get on planes and they're getting off of cruise boats with this is a real issue. And if you want to be able to have an actual government, then we got to get rid of this billionaire mindset of eliminate government, privatize everything. When has that ever worked out? That's what you get with Bloomberg. That's what you get with Biden. And none of the others have a real shot. So, as much as they claim socialist, at least he wants to keep our government intact.
Exactly. Well, Nomiki, thank you for joining me. Give us your pitch for your new show. You got a new show out? I've watched a
Yes.
bunch of videos. It's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. So yeah, the show's about a month old, not even. It's on YouTube at Nomiki Konst. You'll just look up the Nomiki Show. On Patreon, we love patrons because it keeps the show going, and we'll be able to edit more videos, do more content. It's at patreon.com/the Nomiki Show. And since I know you have a great audience, we are doing a live Super Tuesday show in Los Angeles. David, if you want to book a flight, you can come on out.
Mm,
It's going to
I'll have to
be,
see.
and seriously,
All right.
it's an amazing show. We have Michael Brooks, Alona Minkowski, Francesca Fiorentini, Nando Villa, LA Charger Justin Jackson, Lucy Flores, and David Dayan are going to be on stage doing live coverage in front of a live audience, and it's going to be streamed on the Majority Report and many other platforms. So you can get your tickets on bit.ly/LA Super Tues. If you go to like any of my accounts, it's just linked right there. Yeah.
Awesome.
That's
All right.
fun.
I'll link. I'll put all the links below the video in the description box so people can check that out. And I'll think about it.
Come! Oh my God!
I mean, I
Yes!
will think about it. It sounds pretty. It sounds pretty fun.
Probably warmer than Toronto.
Oh my God, definitely. It's freezing cold right here. All right. Thanks again for coming on, Nomiki, and check out her show and all the links below the video. Thanks again.